And hello, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode of Under Review is officially live. Thank you all so much for being here today as we review the Bills' first fun month of 2023, where they finished on a 2-1 mark. And joining me today is Cover One's Anthony Prohaska to go in depth on all the good and maybe even some of the bad that this season has had to offer us so far. I appreciate you all tuning in. Grab a morning cup of coffee on a rainy day and let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, I appreciate you all being here today. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Joe DeRosa. You can find me on Twitter at show_DeRosa. Today's headline is Joe__Ant because of my special guest today of the same name, just without the Joe. Ant, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I peeped that when I came into the stream. I was like, that's very clever. I like that. That brightened my day up. I'm good. I'm a little tired. Had a bit of a chaotic day yesterday, but I'm excited. This weekend is sweet for football in general, and then Bills Dolphins and the schematics of it and the fun of it and the rivalry piece. And it's nice to kind of sit as we approach tomorrow and that important game. It's nice to be here on the show and kind of just take stock of everything that's happened, leading up to it and where we currently sit and stand right now.
Yeah, and that game is going to provide you with a lot of information to go over, whether they win, whether they lose. Film is probably going to be insane. You're probably going to see some things from these teams. I don't think the Dolphins would show you too much differently, but I have this lingering suspicion that the Bills might pull some rabbits out of the hat against Miami just because it's a divisional game. But I'm excited for it too, man. And honestly, just looking back on September, it's really hard to believe that we're entering week 4 of the NFL season after it felt like for so long we were just waiting for it to get here. And now in the blink of an eye, we're already through 3 weeks. And thankfully, the Buffalo Bills have wrapped it up at 2-1. Should have been 3-0, but we'll take the over 500 mark. So, Ant, we're just going to start with looking back on the month and just kind of breaking some things down that we like, maybe things we were concerned about. And we'll start on the offensive side of the ball. And I want to talk to you about Ken Dorsey. I want you to just give me your honest opinion on what you thought of his September, how he's kind of changed things up this year, what you've really seen from him and what you've liked and haven't liked.
I like overall what he's done from a design standpoint, tying in their run concepts with their pass concepts. We're starting to see more pieces where, formationally or personnel wise or alignment wise or play design wise, or sometimes all of those things together in conjunction, we're seeing run concepts that mirror their pass concepts or pass concepts out of their run formations and certain looks that they're normally going to run the ball out of with this type of run, and then running like a sail concept out of it to make things a little easier for Josh Allen. I like what he's done from that regard. I like him switching up the run game plan and how good the run game has been so far this year. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I like how he varied up. Against the Raiders, we saw a lot more downhill attack. We saw a lot more duo versus Washington. We saw more traditional gap runs with pullers. We saw counter and we saw crunch and wham and trap and all that kind of stuff. So I think he's been varied in his attack. I think he's been more streamlined. And I also think he's made more of a concerted effort to get Josh Allen to kind of take some of the easy buttons and almost force his hand into kind of settling him down and reining him in a little bit more. And I thought his game plan was good in week 1. I know it was a loss, but I think that game looks holistically different if Josh doesn't turn into, evil Mr. Hyde, Josh, on the Dr. Jekyll side. So I think he's been good in his variation, but I really like what he's done from a conceptual standpoint and tying things together, varying the attack and having game plans that have made things simpler and easier for Josh Allen, doing more of the things that he likes to get him into a rhythm and kind of shepherd him along his journey of efficiency.
Yeah, that was something I noticed this year that I've really wanted to see from Ken Dorsey. And I know last season towards the end, you saw a bit of progression, but it did feel like even though the offense in every category, their DVOA, were very successful, there was almost like this box that you felt like they were put in, right? Because they were hyper aggressive. They were very committed to attacking you deep, and that would get you into trouble sometimes. This year, even in that Jets game, like you said, it feels far more methodical. It feels far more concise, where rather than trying to force the issue when we don't have to force the issue, we're comfortable with trying to bleed clock and sustain drives, which I was a huge proponent of in the offseason. It was something that I felt this team not only should do, but could do. And going into that Jets game, despite facing a very good, disciplined defense that really made it a kind of a point of emphasis to attack the ball wherever it went, they were moving the ball. Like, these drives were being sustained. You saw involvement from a bunch of different receivers. And one thing that I think was a huge sigh of relief from me, just knowing that this could be the course of the season's plan, was they were really trying to emphasize yards after the catch, because it felt like you want to make things easier for Josh, put the ball in someone's hands and move it. So when they got to the Raiders game, and that was happening a lot, and the Washington game, where they also were not afraid to commit to the run, which was another thing that made me feel really refreshed about the team, I was pretty pleased. And it really bodes well for the rest of the season, knowing that you're seeing this kind of growth in mentality, but also seeing a growth in kind of Josh's game and the offense as a whole, where it doesn't feel like it is just the Josh Allen show. And I credit Dorsey for some of that as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I do want to tie it into some of the things that happened down the stretch, because you mentioned the one piece, and I'm going to try and mention this as much as I can for forever, because it still drives me nuts. Like, the whole vertical aspect of the Bills attacking downfield. Yeah, like down the stretch last year. Yes, some of that was like Dorsey play calling and things. There are so many times when Josh is just pushing the ball downfield when he does not need to. And I think such a common misconception about Dorsey down the stretch, not saying that you're saying this, but I'm saying for people in general, I just want to clarify it. Like, where like the thought was like Dorsey was out there just calling 4 verts and everybody's just running vertical. And he's like, what are they doing? How come it's this and that? And like, there are so many throws where like Josh is chucking it downfield, and like Dawson Knox is open underneath on a little sit route or like a little drag, or there's like other options. And Josh is just like, no, I'm pushing it downfield. And now some of that too, I think, was the elbow. You know, he couldn't make those line drives, straight line throws. It was easier for him to kind of lean back and arch it and cock it and throw it deep. Based on that UCL injury. So some of it was Allen, some of it was the poor offensive line and not being able to protect, and what that did schematically. There were so many pieces that, you know, I started, if it feels harsh, but like criticizing Ken Dorsey around October-ish last year. I felt like a lot of the offense was just him being like, well, Josh Allen's a unicorn, so our offense is going to be, let Josh Allen be a unicorn. And I thought that was too much. It was too much on his shoulders. But then as the season went on, I started to like more of the things that he did. I thought he started to grow and adjust, but I think Allen regressed mentally, or again, tying it into the elbow injury and the offensive line. There were so many pieces, but Dorsey got so much hate for running one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL last year. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's one of the best offenses, but statistically, he had a tremendous year, and this Bills team was a good team. There were so many factors that just went into the play of the offense and kind of how they faltered a little bit down the stretch. And so I thought he would come into this year retooling some things. I think the 12 personnel piece is really tied to that. I think that is a direct result of what he wants this offense to be. Obviously, it works in tandem with the direction Bean and McDermott want, but I think there was a step they wanted last year. I think they wanted OJ Howard to be that second tight end. They wanted that 12 personnel piece. He didn't work out, and so it was kind of like, like let's pivot and kind of do something else. And then even just from a roster standpoint last year, the fact that they brought in Cole Beasley off the street and he became a focal point of their offense for the playoffs tells you the confidence level they had as a team in their weaponry on the offensive side of the ball. Like, no disrespect to Cole Beasley, but that's just like, that's wild. So I thought he would come in retooled and kind of refocused in his design and attack. And yeah, I think it's been strong, and I like what he's done overall. The big piece for me, again, and we'll talk about it a little later, but is really the run piece. I know so many people think about, like, when you think of an offense today and Josh Allen and the Bills, the thought is always like, well, what's he doing for Josh Allen? Like, what's he doing for Josh Allen? Like, what's he doing for Josh Allen? One of the big things he's done for Josh Allen is the design of this run game. And what he's done in tandem with Aaron Cromer, that is arguably the biggest and most important thing that he's done for Josh Allen this year. So I'm happy. I appreciate RJ saying he's going to promise to try not to slander Ken and Simon Dorsey. RJ is a notorious Ken Dorsey disliker, and Wednesday in the film room said that Dorsey was last year. Dorsey was a bottom 5 offensive coordinator, and I wanted to throw my TV, my computer through the window. So I appreciate
TV too,
RJ.
maybe
All of it, every electronic in my household, I wanted to throw out the window. But yeah, he's looked good, and we'll see again. His approach this year, I think last year at the beginning of the year, he emptied the clip more. And then as the season went on, that combined with just being a first-year OC, team started to adjust to him. The book was out a little bit, and he kind of worked backwards. Whereas this year, I think he's working more forwards in terms of building a foundation and setting the table and then tweaking and going from there in order to evolve this offense as teams adjust to him and adapting and surviving and thriving based off of that. So I think it's a bit of a different approach combined with that change in the run game and the offensive line as well.
Yeah, that aggression that you talk about too, a first-year OC combined with at this point you can call him a veteran quarterback, and the fact that Josh has that aggressive mentality, I feel like it's almost in a weird way, because when I talk about Dorsey's growth and I talked about kind of the offense being boxed in, that's really more of I was trying to see like if Ken Dorsey could maybe potentially this year emphasize that game plan being more concise, because even though they might have had options down the road last year, which they did, and I know we've talked about it on this show, it felt like part of being a coach and part of being an OC is being able to kind of get him on track, reel him in, make sure that he knows that it doesn't have to be always vertical. And again,
coax him into that direction, whether that means like you yell at him and be like, throw the flat route, or you design some concept that makes him kind of have to do it. Although he's still the trigger man, but yes, that's a very fair point.
Yeah, and now this year I'm seeing more of that. But when you have, his first year and Josh's natural aggression, I feel like they feed off that. And because it worked is almost the most dangerous part of it, because you went through the season where you played teams like, Green Bay that had a stingy defense, Kansas City, you played Miami and lost, but you had these games where you were in all of them. You were 4-1. You had a formula that was working. Diggs alluded to this, and I didn't even mean to rip him off with that quote, but you really did. Teams adjust, and as a first-year OC, you're trying to figure it out, but like it's kind of hard because you've gotten Josh into such a mode now where he's winning with this aggressive style that it's hard to transition out of it. But it's nice to see that going into this year, there is this kind of hardcore emphasis on slow, methodical, like you said, setting the table, which I have believed in since last year. Enough with the first, second long. Like I want third and short. I want third and medium. I want this to be a situation where, let's be real, it's 3rd and 1. You're not stopping the Bills. It's borderline impossible. So that's the growth I've admired from Ken Dorsey. And I'll just ask, do you have any final thoughts on him before we delve deeper into the offense?
No, I think we hit on a lot of it. I think my biggest thing is I don't think he deserved, myself and Eric as well. Like we were kind of early into the Dorsey criticism piece, and I think that freight train kind of ran away from everything in a little bit last year. I don't think he deserved a lot of the criticism that he got last year. I think and I don't think this is, I don't want to sound like a dick with it. I think it's hard for people a lot to discern when there are struggles, like to discern what the source of it is. Is it play calling? Is it design? Is it players? And I think because Josh Allen is Josh Allen and the golden boy of this franchise, he last year was the very last person that was going to be criticized. So I think Dorsey got a lot of unfair hate put onto his plate. We saw it even this year too. Like there were still people in week 1 that were like, well, Dorsey's got to get better. I'm like, if you came away from the Jets game and your thought was Dorsey was the problem in that game, I will, dude, what are we doing? And so I think he kind of became the low-hanging fruit blanket blame, sacrificial lamb of Bills fans last year, where it was like, well, Dorsey sucks. Not saying that he was perfect and not saying that he was amazing. But it's nice to see him kind of getting more of his due this year and people kind of turning the corner and recognizing some of the improvements that he's made, even though they don't know necessarily the bones and the structure of it.
Yeah. And again, if you watch that Jets game just from a film view, and I'm a newbie film watcher, as Ant knows, so I'm not trying to speak on a pedestal. I am very much a learner, and I will preach that I'm a learner, so I never come off in a way that sounds anything more than that. But having watched that and seeing some of Josh's interceptions and realizing that there were options for Josh underneath kind of proves that point too. And I think that just opens up to when you watch these things, it's kind of helping Dorsey's case in ways, not all the time, but you kind of see, wow, this did not need to happen. That is not on Ken Dorsey. And I think the ultimate takeaway I had, and I think Bills fans have had, is it's okay to criticize Josh when Josh does something wrong. It's okay. Doesn't mean he's bad. It just means he's allowed to be criticized.
Yes, both things can happen. It's the same thing going into this week. Like, I feel like saying something good about the Dolphins means like you think the Bills suck or the Bills are going to lose. Like I said some good things on the Dolphins, And a bunch of people came to the comments and were like, oh, well, then, like, I guess you think the Bills are obviously going to lose. I'm like, I didn't say any of that. Like, what are we doing? Like, I feel that you can live in the light and the dark. Like, there's all these shades of gray. But I think if you criticize Josh, like, people think it's an indictment on, like, well, he sucks. It's like, no, like, people make mistakes and they can improve and grow and go from there.
Yeah, that's too nuanced, and some people don't like it. Also, Beta Jim here says, sorry I'm late. Jim, come on. You can't watch now. You can't watch now. You have to leave. That's messed up. Thank you for being here, Jim. We appreciate you. But Ant, let's move on now, and let's talk more specifically about the Bills' offensive line. It has been something of a revelation these first couple of weeks, and really something that I think every single Bills fan was hoping, given the moves that they made, that they would take some sort of step forward. But it hasn't even been just the addition of Connor McGovern, the addition of O'Cyrus Torrence, but really, like you've pointed out, and something that I've seen you talk about, kind of what Ken Dorsey is doing with this offensive line. Aaron Cromer coaching them up, Spencer Brown getting the assistance he needs and actually looking a bit more comfortable week after week. Obviously, some bad reps still, but talk to me about your thoughts on just this Bills offensive line so far and what you've seen from it.
It's revelation. I feel like I want to say revelation. I don't know if that's like too strong, but like I like it. It's just what they've done from a run standpoint has really impressed me. And even pass protection has been better as well. I think they made a concerted effort this offseason, bringing in Connor McGovern, somebody who fit kind of the mold they had on the interior already, like good in space, good mover, guy you want to pull, like athletic, like he fit in that Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, guard type of interior play that they like. But one of his strengths was anchoring in pass protection. So the ability to secure the depth of the pocket. Then they draft O'Cyrus Torrence, who's also good at anchoring and securing the depth of the pocket, except for one really bad clip against Jalen Carter against Georgia. I always like to say that caveat because someone always tries to come through and be like, you got blown up by Jalen Carter that one time. So Torrence is good at, anchoring and securing the depth of the pocket. I think they made a conscious effort to try and create that for Josh Allen this year. And then being able to secure the depth of that pocket has allowed them schematically to consistently support Spencer Brown in a variety of ways with tight end help, with running back help, whether it's directly attached to the line of scrimmage or it's chippers coming off or somebody coming out of the backfield. I think that strength on the interior isn't only good for Josh Allen and protecting and securing the depth of the pocket. It's also helped them mitigate their biggest weakness on the offensive line, which has been Spencer Brown. And my biggest thought on the line coming into the year was when they drafted O'Cyrus Torrence, and I've said it like a million times on every show, Twitter, all this stuff, like he was such a different skill set or frame type of player than the rest of their interior line. Like he was not a movement guy. He was not an in-space guy. He is a downhill vice grip, bare paws for hands, people mover, mauler. Like I saw him up close at the Senior Bowl. I was 1.5 feet away from him and I saw the size of him. I heard the pads pop every time he made contact and I watched him just chuck 300-pound dudes around left and right during drills. He was such a different type of player than they had on the interior. And so my thought was, okay, he can anchor, like maybe they're a move towards that, but what does it do for the run game? Because he's more, that downhill guy. Like he's not the guy you're pulling and getting into space. He's more of the pin, or, you're running inside zone or you're running duo, which they've done a ton this year with duo. Mm-hmm. Like you want him creating vertical displacement, going downhill, mauling, moving people. And he won that job. They've leaned into that. He also lost some weight, which has allowed him to move better at the NFL level, which is tremendous either by him or the Bills by design. The offensive line has been tremendously important. They were one of my biggest questions coming into this year. I thought it's been a weakness on this team the past couple of years. I thought Saffold last year, his addition would do enough to kind of stabilize things. As the year went on, the mileage on the tires really started to show for him. And then Spencer Brown was a complete liability last year. I know he was injured, but regardless, he was just extremely inconsistent in his play. And he is a bit inconsistent still not great, which is why they've been providing him so much help. But the offensive line has been a plus this year, especially in the run game, but I think pass protection as well. And with Allen's athleticism and what he can do, I've continued to say it, which is what's frustrated me about the line. It would be amazing if they had like this top 10 all-pro line. You don't need that. Nope. Just be consistent. Like the problem is the Bills' offensive lines the last couple of years, like from efficiency standpoints, they would eventually grade out to like 17th, 16th, 15th. But week-to-week variance, you never knew what you were getting. One week, they'd be like the 9th best line. The next week, they'd be like the 24th best line. And it was just this roller coaster. And you can't build game plans like that. And if you're Josh Allen, we've seen it. when he starts to get pressured and gets hit, he gets skittish in the pocket, not from a fear standpoint, but from the standpoint of, I don't trust what's going on. Screw it. I'm going to go make a play. Then he starts bailing from the pocket early. He starts trying to evade when he doesn't have to evade. And then that contributes to the snowballing effect of him trying to push the ball and doing all these things. So I thought the Bills O-line was just important for Josh physically, but also mentally in terms of the kind of player that he is. I think we've gotten that from this offensive line this year. And my biggest thing is the run game. Like, I know people give me crap for it all the time. Like, I still think the run is tremendously important. How you run the ball and how you defend the run is still the basis of every game plan, from numbers in the box to coverages you play on the back end. And and everybody was talking all offseason about like, oh, what they can do with Allen in the pass game. My biggest thing was like, if they get a run game, this offense, look what the Chiefs became last year with Isaiah Pacheco in that run game and what they did. Like, look how versatile and multiple the Eagles and Niners are, all these ridiculous offenses. So the offensive line has been key to how good the run game has been this year. They've been better in pass pro. I think it's been a revelation, is kind of a good way to put it, because I didn't expect Torrance to be this good out of the gate. I didn't think McGovern would be this plus of a player. And again, those are both really important because it allows them to then give Spencer Brown support because they're confident in the other 4 players on the line.
Yeah. The run game concept that you bring up is interesting because I think there's a skewed perspective on what a run game is in the NFL. And it's not to say that it's not great to have 1,000-yard bell cow running back in your backfield that coincides with a great offensive line. But I've always said, as I've gotten more into the sport and watched teams like the Chiefs, teams like the Bills, where they have these great quarterbacks, and that's kind of the point of emphasis of your offense, is that your running game just needs to be the serviceable accessory, the eye candy. And when we talk about it, and I mean, we're talking about Miami this week, the crux of their offense and the ability of what they're able to do. Obviously, they have Tyreek Hill, but their running game is so effective, and the different types of motion they come at you with, the different types of blocking, the speed of the backfield is a massive threat. And that's
studying it all week. It's so impressive.
It's a full functioning machine. I actually made a joke that it's like the Miami Dolphins offense is like if someone pointed a gun to your head and told you to solve a Rubik's Cube in 6 seconds, or they'll pull the trigger. That's what it feels like.
Yeah,
it's genuinely insane. But you see like what that rushing attack causes for a defense, especially a passing defense, who might have to now, okay, we have to stack the box because we're letting them get too many yards. Oh, play action, or they're actually sending it, and that's a problem. So for the Bills offense with Josh Allen, and when we talk about making things easier for him and Ken Dorsey, adding in a stable, consistent rushing attack is good. It doesn't mean James Cook needs to have 1,000 yards. It doesn't mean you need these all-world numbers from him. But if James Cook is averaging 6.1 yards per carry, which I believe is his tick right now and is second most in the league, and you're talking about Damian Harris and Latavius Murray change of pace backs to be able to just kind of clean up short downs and distances or goal line formations, that opens everything up for your passing game. It makes everything, I don't want to say easier because nothing's easy in the NFL, but it gives you more versatility. It gives you more to play with as a passing offense. But I agree with all your points about the offensive line, Ant. I mean, when we talk about O'Cyrus Torrence and Connor McGovern, one of the biggest problems that I think the Bills had last year was just interior offensive line protection. And I think the problem was for Josh is able to get outside of the pocket and he can evade anybody. You were seeing it on display against Washington. You could see how they were kind of manipulating defenders to go wide so that he could have these holes to run through. But where I think the problem lied was you could not trust the middle, the interior of your pocket. So as Josh is watching these plays develop and at times had to be, wanted to get these balls out more explosively, maybe it was an issue where he couldn't necessarily hit the middle of the field with timing because of the pressure up the middle. It really messed him up. And you saw, like, again, this mental kind of regression, and whether it was the injury, whether it was the fact that he had no trust for both Bates and Saffold, Pro Bowler. I should never forget the name. You saw the I'll clown that every single time. I'm sorry, but you saw.
I hate the Pro Bowl. The Pro Bowl is such a joke. Like, and not even to like disrespect Saffold, but like no one cares about it. Like, it's just so dumb. And the fact that he was so bad down the stretch. The fact that he made the Pro Bowl, like, kudos to him. Like, take the free trip, take the vacation. Like, he's obviously a much better guard than I will ever be in my life. So I probably don't even deserve to criticize him. But he was so bad. I don't know how somebody was like, "Oh, we need another guy for the Pro Bowl." You know what? Let's get Roger Saffold.
Hey, he protected for Josh Allen. Yeah, he should be good, right? No,
he looked great.
No, 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 no. And again, that all ties into kind of where I'm going with it, where it's like it's a breath of fresh air to see the additions of McGovern and Torrance, things where you kind of hope they work out, actually work out. And in ways where you have McGovern coming from Dallas, he's known as more of this like pass pro guy. But I've seen them pull him a few times and I've seen some of his blocking and it looks good. And then Osiris Torrance is eating up double teams and he's also just a physical specimen. And even if he's lost weight, he's moving quickly. He's getting these blocks off and he's holding his own in pass pro. And all of these things are elevating the games, in my opinion, and feel free to agree or disagree, and I'll ask you what you think of it, but elevating the games of Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown, because Deion Dawkins, I think, deserves a ton of credit for how he's playing this year. I don't hear his name called, and I love that I'm not hearing his name called because that means he's just getting to work, but you see some of these vicious downfield blocks he's laying and how he's anchoring in pass protection. Honestly, what are your thoughts on that concept of just the interior kind of bolstering the tackles as a whole?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's bolstered the entire structure and play of the offense. I loved one of the points you made, with like Allen not being able to get the guys with the protection last year. And it's one of the things, like, not to tie it back to Dorsey, but that I alluded to, like, with it, there would be plays where guys are coming open, but the play takes like 2.5 seconds to develop and Allen gets pressured in 1.5 seconds. So he's already bailed from the pocket. Like there's a bunch, especially starting in the Detroit game, really, where McKenzie is coming open on a deep over, or Knox is coming open later in the year, and it's there. And so you look, and the guy is wide open. And so then you're like, well, why isn't Allen throwing to him? And then your eyes go back to Josh Allen, and he's already running. Like he's already stiff arming an edge or a defensive tackle and is trying to run and do something. Interesting comment there from Beta Jim. I'm excited when we get to the tight ends because I see a lot of, I saw it in the comments a little bit. People like, oh, we're underusing Kincaid and this and that.
Yeah.
It's great. We'll have a conversation with it. But that offensive line, it hindered a lot of what they could do last year. Like you want to push the ball downfield with like under center play action or these longer, like bigger, the like 7-step drops and these longer concepts. You can if you don't think your offensive line can hold up for 2.5 or 3 seconds, or we want to hit this deep crosser, 20 yards downfield. Cool. That means you have to protect for a little bit longer. The Bills couldn't protect last year to get a lot of those pieces, or even some of the stuff underneath, like a quick hitter that takes like 2 seconds. Well, Allen got pressured in a 1.5 seconds. He's already running for his life. I think it's calmed him down. I think it's solidified things we've seen across the line as a whole. And I think it's helped Mitch Morse. I think it's helped Spencer Brown. I think it's helped Deion Dawkins. Even for Brown, him and Osiris Torrance are a really good pair in the run game. They work very well together. Their chemistry with one another combined with their physicality is working very well in the run game. So I think, this one is kind of like a simple piece. Like if you drop in better pieces along the interior, it benefits the players on the outside and then Mitch Morse as well. And I think you've just got a stabilizing presence. I think what's also helped is, fingers crossed, no jinx, this group has worked together for the majority of the offseason and then preseason and then continued to go. So there's chemistry. They're starting to understand one another. There's not, last year, like, Saffold didn't play a ton in the offseason because of that car accident or whatever happened.
Oh, right. Yeah. Rib injury.
So he wasn't even really playing in camp or the preseason. Spencer Brown had his stuff going on. So they weren't really playing together until, bullets started flying live, which is not a good recipe for success. So there's been a lot of pieces that have gone into the success of the offensive line. But like to your point, it starts with McGovern and Torrance, and it's been a positive domino effect for pass pro, for Josh Allen, for Dorsey, for the run game, for Brown, for Morris, for Dawkins. Like it's really been a successful piece.
Yeah, I agree completely. It's been very refreshing to see them play so well. They're going to be tested again this week against Miami's front, which has a lot of talent. But seeing them go up against the likes of the Jets front, which it was a tougher game, but that's just a really good unit. Going up against Washington and really kind of controlling that game. I mean, it felt like, I don't want to say domination, but there's so much talent on that Washington front. And they knew, like, okay, redirection. It doesn't have to be like physical manhandling. And they did this in 2021, and I didn't think they'd get to do it again, and they did. And it was so fun to watch.
And that performance too, right? Like that's a kudos to like the individual players on the line, but it's also like kudos and credit to Dorsey and Cromer for figuring out different ways to mitigate that front. Like, oh, they're fast, they're going to get penetration. Cool, we're going to use crunch or trap and wham and let them get upfield and then slam them. Oh, like they want to, again, we know that they can hunt and they're going to attack. Let's move the pocket, quarter rolls, half rolls, full boots, fake, and then go the other way. Let's use some chippers. Let's release them out. Like, again, everything tying together, knowing the skill set, strengths and weaknesses of your players. knowing the strengths and weaknesses of your opponent, and then designing a game plan with the schematics to then mitigate the strengths of your opponent, amplify the strengths of your players while mitigating their weaknesses and exploiting your opponent's weaknesses. It's been a really good piece. But again, you can't do it if you don't have the talent up front and if they don't execute. So it's kind of a chicken and egg, but it's all good no matter how you look at it.
Absolutely. We're going to pivot to the running game. But before we do, Linda West, you are the best. Thank you so much for this contribution. We appreciate you so much and appreciate you watching. And she says, last Dolphins game I attended at home, we won and tore down the goalposts. I'm hoping I'm good luck tomorrow. Thanks, guys. I hope you bring them good luck. It's going to be a tough game, but if they win, we'll know exactly who to thank for that. So thank you so much, Linda. Really, really appreciate you watching. All of you watching, again, thank you so much. Please keep contributing in the chat. Like this video, subscribe to Cover One. I'll put a link to the premium pass later. We have a couple reads coming up, but I want to pivot over to the running game. And just again, we talked about it briefly before and kind of its effect on this offense. But if you want to, just give me your thoughts on kind of Cook, Murray, Harris, and how they've been working and what you've seen from this run game in a little more depth.
It's a good rotation of backs. Murray, I don't know how he has as much juice as he does still left in the tank and in the wheels with how long he's been in this league. But, he's functioning out in space, like in the pass routes after, chipping and releasing. He's been a hammer downhill. Harris has been what he is, not the best vision in the world, but this guy who is effective from these under center runs and getting downhill. And Cook has been a legitimate RB1 for this team. You see the impact that his speed and his juice has, for the offense from a talent standpoint, but also from a schematic standpoint. And I think what's nice about how all three of them work is they've been put into an offense that is maximizing all their skill sets with similar concepts. Like all three of them run duo very successfully, but they run it in different ways, right? Like all three can read that play side linebacker and flow inside. But if you have Cook, he's got the ability to bounce it outside if the front gets washed. And so it can work for Cook in a different way than it can work for Murray, than it can work for Harris. And I think they've leaned into that really well with all three backs. You're seeing all three of them benefit, and especially benefiting in a way that I don't think anybody was going to look at this backfield coming into the year and being like, you know what? The James Cook, Latavius Murray, Damian Harris backfield might be one of the best backfields in football. Like no one was saying that coming into this year. And each one of them have looked good, and it's a testament to them, but also a testament to the schematics and bones of this running game. And all three have really benefited.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the thing that it's really funny watching this Bills offense this year comparing to last year and seeing kind of the concepts actually exist in 2022 that they are pulling now, but just with the talent to kind of pull it off a little more effectively. Mm-hmm. Like when we talk about two tight end sets, when we talk about the running back, the trio, the three-headed beast, and you talk about some of the offensive line concepts, there's actually the ability to do it now. And it's nice because last year you were seeing Singletary, and I like Singletary. I thought he was a perfectly good back. I thought he had power. He had good contact balance. He just wasn't very fast. Mm-hmm. But like the emergence of James Cook and his speed, which is now kind of your bread and butter in your running game, and knowing that if you create these gaps, he can get through or he can bounce outside and really manipulate defenders in that level. But now you have the change of pace backs in seasoned veterans like Damian Harris and Latavius Murray, who are also just these downhill bruisers, who I think like that just only enhances the threat of Cook more and only enhances the threat of your 12 personnel more, because if you're running out of it with these two tight ends and you're having success, which the Bills have had, now all of a sudden, as soon as they start cooking a little more downfield action, which again, it's not that they haven't, but more they get into a rhythm where they're starting to exploit matchups and Knox and Kincaid are burning defenses, it's going to make everything, I keep saying it's going to make everything better, but it is like, it's going to help the Bills offense continue to be this multi-dimensional beast. And I mean, I'll transition because I know you're excited to talk about it and I want to talk about it too, but let's talk about some tight ends.
Real quick, can I give some rush stats that are pretty nuts?
Oh, absolutely. Please.
So it was when I was researching things for the Dolphins, because the Dolphins run game is so good. The Dolphins are second in EPA per rush and second in total EPA. Their reason they're second is because the Bills are first in EPA per rush and first in total EPA, which is nuts.
That's insane.
And then if you're just looking at James Cook, you mentioned earlier, so he's second in the entire NFL in rushing yards behind only Christian McCaffrey. He's tied for fourth in yards per carry. This next one is the big one. So this is all out of 56 qualifying running backs. He's second in total rushing yards, tied for fourth in yards per carry. The next two are the big ones. Fourth in yards after contact, 10th in yards after contact per carry. And then he's tied for 9th in missed tackles forced, tied for 2nd in runs of 10 or more, and tied for 4th in runs of 15 or more. He's shown better contact balance than I thought he would in the NFL. It looks like he's thickened up a little bit, put on a little muscle. He's breaking arm tackles. He's falling forward. He's running through guys. He's got a little more physicality and strength to go with that speed and that juice. But adding that physicality and that strength to his game has not diminished his speed or his juice. So it's nice to see what he's done like individually, and he's spearheaded that attack. Like, again, the Bills are a very good run team, and they're varied and diverse. They can close games out, or they can use it to set the table with it, or mix it in throughout. Like, and so just a couple of those pieces to really drive home like how well this running game has done.
And what's refreshing about it to me too is it hasn't been one-dimensional types of running, right? Like, I mean, they are attacking the lighter boxes a bit more, but they're also probably being shown lighter boxes more. But when it comes to James Cook and when it comes to how they're pulling these off, and like you mentioned, duo and these types of gap runs, I was worried because it felt like last year, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously schematically last year you seen everything, but it felt like their success came on I don't want to call it gimmicky runs, but it was like these every now and then types of runs, like a pin and pull where like, okay, you'll have some success and you stray away from it. And I don't know if that was because of interior line not working or maybe teams were starting to clamp on it. But this year, it feels like if they want to bounce outside with Cook, they can. If they want to run up the gut with him, they can. If they want to pull off like a trap run where they have this kind of RPO, Allen holds, hands it off, and then they move up the field with it, they can. And that's really fun to watch. And I think, again, just talking about what it adds to the Bills offense, it just makes it a multi-dimensional point of attack where there's just a million different ways that they can run on you. And again, setting the table on these early downs to me matters the most. I did not know about that yards after contact stat with Cook. I knew he was doing well in that category, but that is bonkers.
And you think about it, like once you hear it, you start to think in your head, like, oh yeah, he is kind of like breaking arm tackles, or like, again, even the little things that count of like, he gets tackled by a safety, but he puts his shoulder down and falls forward for an extra yard or 2 yards. Like, that's also counting in that. He's done that consistently. Like, he doesn't get knocked back. He doesn't get, driven to the ground right away when he gets tackled. He's not getting tripped up by arm tackles. He's juking dudes and setting things up so he can like run through arm tackles and shoulders and all these pieces. Yeah, it's been a really refreshing piece to have him. Singletary was always adequate for me. I think I was a little lower on him than a lot of Bills fans or analysts. And part of it was because of that juice. Like, if it was blocked for 6 yards, Devin Singletary was going to get you 6 yards, which is fine. Like, that's fine. But if it's blocked for 6 yards, James Cook can get you 16 or he can get you 20. And that's a huge, huge difference in an era of football where defenses are trying to limit explosives through the pass. So if you have the ability to create explosives in the run, like the Bills do with James Cook, that starts to tilt the table. And then everything that domino effects from there, where, teams don't feel comfortable with 2 high shells. You got to spin a safety down. Now all of a sudden they're running more single high looks, or there's less men on the back end. There's less coverage numbers. Now you have an advantage, yada, yada. It's a huge discussion from there. And that's why the run game has been the biggest. You need that pivot in general, but also I think it's just tremendously important in today's NFL.
Absolutely. And one thing that I love about Cook, and it'll be my final thought on the rushing attack before we transition to the tight end talk, I love that he falls forward. And I know you mentioned this briefly, but when I watched Singletary get swallowed up by the line, it felt like when he got hit and he got pushed back. It feels like with Cook, even in those moments where you think the play's dead, he finds a way to fall forward. And when we talk about setting the table on early downs and getting these precious yards, if you're trying to run a more methodical offense, the difference between, 1st and 9 and 1st and 10 becoming a 2nd and 9 or a 2nd and 7 to me is so big, especially when you're talking about now, all right, it gets incrementally easier. And if we don't want to play for a 3rd down, but if we have to, we know that if we run something behind the sticks, it's still going to be a much easier time to sustain this drive and take time off the clock, which, by the way, like I said in Spaces yesterday, and I think that's what they're going to try and do against Miami. So with James Cook, with the fact that the Dolphins, I don't know their stats against the rush, but you could correct me if I'm wrong. I believe their EPA or against isn't great, but I'd have to look it up. But I do know that they're going to, in my opinion, lean on this running game against Miami, and I think it's going to be successful.
Let's see. Good news for us is I am already on SIS. So run defense, EPA per attempt. Yeah, they are giving up so they have, so EPA, when you go from like a defensive standpoint, you want to be in the negative. EPA per attempt, they are last. which is like bad, like last in a bad way. So they're giving up 0.11 per attempt on the ground from an EPA standpoint, which means they are the worst statistically. Going up against, I'll probably tweet this later now that I just found it now, going up against the Bills running attack that is the best from an EPA per attempt standpoint. Like, that's a big piece.
You heard it here first, folks. I've said it. I'll say it again. It's going to be a rushing battle tomorrow, and you are going to see a game that is probably going to be something like 27-24 or 24-23 because these teams are going to try and bleed the clock on each other and hope for explosive plays. And I think it just comes down to whoever is going to prevent less. But I don't want to delve too deep into that. I want to talk about tight ends. Let's talk about some tight ends. Let's talk about 12P and Kincaid and Knox in this offense and what you've seen so far and what you're expecting from them going ahead.
So what I've seen so far is the benefit of 12 personnel. You're seeing it a little in the pass game, but you're seeing it more in the run game for now. And again, this is where I think things start to build and go from there. Like what the Bills are doing with their 2 tight end looks is they're using them in formations that are providing advantageous looks from a run standpoint. And then they're winning up front in the run game because teams, and instead of going into the year, how defenses play the Bills 12 personnel grouping will tell you how like they view Dalton Kincaid. Like if they are putting a, big nickel or a third safety or another linebacker out there, that means they like view him as more of like an overall tight end piece. If they are looking at him and keeping their nickel back in the game, they are viewing him as basically like a bigger wide receiver. And so that dictates to you like what you're going to do from there. But what we've seen is, Kincaid improving as a blocker and being functional in that regard. And a lot of the success of the Bills run game this year is tied to what they've done with 12 personnel and defenses staying with their nickel personnel and having lighter boxes from like a size and frame standpoint. If a defense has like 7 or 8 in the box, but 2 of those 7 or 8 are a nickel corner or an outside corner, that's advantage for the offense because Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid can take those dudes, or they can wash down an edge player or a linebacker and put Cook one-on-one with a corner as he bounces it outside on duo like we've seen before. So I think the tight ends have worked from a run game standpoint. And from a pass standpoint, again, I'm not really concerned. I think as teams start to respect the Bills' run game more, I think the Bills will start to lean more into the under center play action piece. I think they'll start to lean into some more RPOs and sucking guys in, but then also just pass looks out of those run alignments and run formations that they've used 12 personnel with so far. Like it's just, that's where it comes with building everything. If you're showing A on tape right now in the beginning of the year, as the season goes on, teams are going to see that and they're going to be like, boom, here comes A. And you're like, nah, we just made it look like A. Now we're going to do B. So I think you need to wait and see as things continue to stack and succeed and go forward. I also think with some of the things with Kincaid, like I know people are talking about his targets and he's not being productive, yada, yada. A lot of that too is just tied to Stephon Diggs dominates the target share in this offense. Like the ball is going to go where Stephon Diggs goes. And then there's some other pieces tied into it as well. And I think too, like, again, Kincaid is in an offense where he's not the number 1 target. He's really not the number 1 tight end. So like your expectations kind of have to be tempered with the game flow and the plan. And then again, there's the yin and yang of everything, right? Like complaining about, well, Kincaid's not seeing a ton of targets. Yeah, but he's seeing really good success on run block reps and the Bills run attack is tremendous. So like there's reasons why things aren't happening. I think, we've seen it in the comments, like I think seeing Sam Laporta, who I loved, like he was my tight end too coming out in this draft. Like,
I was wondering if this was going to come up from anyone.
I saw it on Twitter a lot, like on Thursday night, which I did not know was a thing. Like, and I recognize like the comment there from like Sarah, like if you're seeing another rookie tight end ball out, you're like, well, why can't my rookie tight end do that? And one is just a different offensive piece. Laporta is a different player than Kincaid. And again, I say this, I loved Sam Laporta. He was my tight end too. I would have been fine if the Bills took him at the end of round 1 or took him in round 2. I loved Sam Laporta. But Laporta's success is not an indictment on Kincaid's, and you have to look at the usage rates and being down the field and what kind of offense they're in and how they're being used. And again, we're 4 games in, like you have to build and go from there. I think the Bills, like we keep continuing to talk about, I think in the big thing for everyone, offensively, defensively, the big piece for the conversation of like the first month for the Bills, it's they have set the table and set the baseline and the foundation for things offensively and defensively. And then when you set that baseline and set that foundation, then you start to build and tweak and adapt and go from there. And that's the opposite of what they did last year. They came out and kind of put the whole house together in the first week. And then by the middle of the year, everybody was like, oh, I kind of see the blueprints for this house. So let's go try and figure out a way to break in. Now they're building it brick by brick, week by week. So the house will be finished and complete by week 15, 16. And it's harder to adjust, even though you have more tape on it still. So I think it's still a wait and see piece. Kincaid is going to get his. There's a lot of different usage pieces that aren't necessarily tied to raw stats. I even saw some of the comments too, like Deontay Hardy not being used. Eric and I broke this down in the film room. Like, he's running these clear out routes that are creating space for Stephon Diggs, similar to, it's a very similar conversation we had last year around Gabe Davis. Well, how come Davis is running all these vertical routes, and how come he doesn't get targeted? And how come he's not doing this? He's not putting up these numbers. Gabe Davis is the one who's pulling defenders and pulling coverage so that Stephon Diggs can slip in behind and get space on a dagger concept or all these pieces. Hardy is doing his job. And I think you're seeing that with Kincaid as well. And I know this is a very long-winded answer, but I think people get too consumed by the raw stats of things and think, well, he only got 2 targets, so he's not doing good. He's not involved in the offense. That's not true. And also, not every route run is for you to get the ball. Sometimes your job is to run a good route to pull defenders to get the other guy open. And a lot of times that happens to be people's jobs in this offense to get Stephon Diggs open or allow him to work in these one-on-ones. So it's a bigger piece. I think he's been a good contributor on this team. There's a reason the Bills have a 45% usage rate in 12 personnel, which is first in the league, and 15 percentage points higher than the teams that were tied for first last year in 12 personnel. He's successful, and it's allowed this offense to operate as it has. And this Bills offense has been good to start the year. You'll see more targets as the year goes along, but you also got to put it into the expectations of what this offense is doing.
Also, how cool is it that this entire offseason we were all talking about 12 personnel. And there was this part of me, the cynical part of my brain that was saying, we're not going to actually do this, right? Like we're all talking about it. Like, it's not going to actually happen. They'll just stick in 11. No. They have run 12 more than anyone in the league, and they're one of the lowest teams in 11 personnel, which I think is insane to see that transition. But you know what? It's productive, and I agree with you, Ant. One thing about Kincaid that I said going into this year when it came to my expectations for him was between him and Knox. Again, I think you were on the show when I said this, 2 halves of 1,000-yard receiver. I think Kincaid will probably hit 500 or maybe even 600 if he starts cooking at the end of the year a little more. But it's not irrational to say that won't happen. And I'm okay with him being a functioning part of the formation as a whole, kind of a part that just enhances the machine. Because the thing, too, is you have to walk before you run. And you have to prove that you're capable of run blocking and that you're capable of holding your assignments and finding work down the field, because that just makes the usage of 12P more effective for when you want to run different types of things out of it, whether you're running out of it, whether you're passing out of it. Kincaid has to prove that he's an NFL tight end and not just a receiver. And if he can do that, along with Dawson Knox, who we know is capable of doing both, now 12P becomes your buddy. And it's like, we can lean on this in different ways, because we know that if Kincaid's lined up to look like a blocker and he's leaking out for a route, oh, crap, they're probably thinking we're running the ball and we're not. So it's very much like I think people just got to be a little patient. I think this happens every year with one rookie from the class that the team didn't take. You see them successful, and you think that, like, because it's not happening with your team, they're not using him right. They're using him, and they're using him frequently. And also, like, again, it's not like Kincaid hasn't been targeted. First and foremost, the Jets game where Josh threw a pick, Kincaid's open. He's open, and he has a route behind the first down marker.
The pick to end his last pick that happened with the fourth picker or the fourth turnover or whatever.
In Washington?
Huh?
Or in a Jets game or Washington?
No, the Jets game. And then it happened again. There was another time. It happened on the exact same concept earlier. Like, he had Kincaid open both times. It was similar to, again, not to tie to the Dorsey piece, but people all offseason were like, well, Dorsey's got to get Knox involved. I was like, Knox is open a ton down the stretch last year. Allen is not going to him. Like, it's just, there's all these, it's just all these like misconceptions drive me nuts. But you're spot on. Like, it's just how it all, I had another point too, and I got frustrated right now and forgot it.
Well, also, like, again, the Raiders game, Josh threw a pass to Kincaid in the end zone. That was a good play by the defense to break down on it. That ball also got to his hands. So really, it could have been a great play. He got rocked, and like, I feel for him. It's not on him because that's just good defense. But like, it's not that they're not getting him involved. It's that their usage for him is just much more methodical and patient. And he's not going to be. The problem was someone compared him to Travis Kelce. Someone did it. Someone in the NFL universe said it, and people ran with it. And it's not anyone in this chat. He's not Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce also had to walk before he ran. It's going to take time for him to fully develop. But again, that could also just mean the course of the year. And if Dalton Kincaid ends up with 500 yards and a couple touchdowns, but 12 personnel is our crux, and we're running out of it and we're passing out of it and it's successful, fine by me.
You got to let these rookies breathe. I don't want there to be another situation, and it's not the same situation as what I'm about to say. Don't turn Dalton Kincaid into another Kyrie Elam situation where everybody was like, well, how come this? He should be playing. He should be playing. And I think Kincaid should be playing as much as he is and getting the work that he is. I did not think Kyrie Elam should be getting the work that he was last year. And I thought a lot of these stats that everybody was throwing out last year was a bit of fool's gold, and it turned out to be that way. Bean and McDermott said some things in the offseason, and then people just get stuck on, even now, like going into this week, the people that are like, we should play Kyrie Elam. He lost the corner job to Christian Benford and Dane Jackson. It was a three-way competition. He came in third. What are we doing? And so stop sending these expectations for these guys, especially early in their career. Like I said, like Sam Laporta has played 4 games. Dalton Kincaid has played 3. Who they're both going to be as pros, we have no idea. Laporta could fall off the face of the earth and become the best tight end ever. Same thing for Kincaid. We have no idea. They're barely into a quarter of their rookie season. And again, how they're being used and what their offenses are doing are 2 completely different things. And if your rebuttal to that is, well, yeah, Laporta's being used better in that offense. Look at the Bills' offense and how good they are with the run. And a lot of that stems from that 12 personnel piece because of the schematic disadvantage it puts the defense in. And again, once defenses start to adjust to that from the run standpoint is when you gouge them and attack them with the pass. And if they don't adjust, then fine. You keep running the ball and you'll be number 1 in EPA and EPA per attempt. You cannot have everything. You lean into different pieces. Rock, paper, scissors, hit them where they're not. That's what the Bills are doing, and it's why they've been successful to this point. Oh, yeah.
I have to type something real fast. And just
no, you're fine. Do your thing. Again, I think the expectation piece is huge, right? I think if you come in thinking, same thing with Ed Oliver.
There we go.
Ed Oliver is Ed Oliver has largely been fine. Like, I don't think he's been worthy of a top 10 pick. This year he's playing like it. He's an absolute monster. But, I mean, everything is tied to expectations. You know, people love Christian Benford because he was a 6th-round pick and he's starting. People are down on Kyrie Elam because he was a 1st-round pick and he should be. And that's fair, but you also got to give these guys time, and you can't start comparing them to other people and all these pieces. And, oh, that's fair from Chris there.
Yeah.
You know, this was the one you were talking about earlier when we realized, like, we're about 4 weeks in. I saw like the update last night that his suspension got reduced.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
It got knocked down from 6 to 4. And so it was like, oh, he's eligible to play now. And I was like, how is he eligible to play? Like, we haven't played 4 games. And I was like, oh my God, the Lions have played 4 games. We're in week 4. It's October. Yeah. Like, holy hell. Like, that was I saw it on the ticker last night. As I was, super late while I was watching. I forgot what I had on TV, but I saw it and I was like, oh man, yeah. So again, temper your expectations, but also realize that someone's success is not just tied to the raw stats and the raw production. You got to look at it from a bigger perspective.
Absolutely. I fully agree. And we're going to transition to the defensive side of the ball. But before we do such a thing, I just have to ask you one question, and it's a very important question. But that question is, do you like fantasy football?
I do, even though it's the bane of my existence.
Oh, yes. Well, boy, do I want to tell you about the easiest way to get some action on the NFL, and it's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player's stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry, get every single pick right, and take home some cold, hard cash. Use the code COVER1 and get your first deposit doubled up to $100 by Underdog Fantasy. And thank you again so much to Underdog for being a partner and sponsor of COVER1. We appreciate it dearly. Now, let us transition to the defensive side of the ball. And one polarizing figure, controversial, whatever you want to call him, is Mr. Sean McDermott. And we have seen a very, very positive return on investment from this defense with the likes of Leonard Floyd, the extension of Ed Oliver. Sean McDermott really just calling what we expected him to call, which was a very aggressive defense, but seemingly situationally aware, which I appreciate from him. So, Roll, let's hear what you think about this defense at Sean McDermott.
I like what he's done. And, you kind of alluded to it now, him pushing the buttons at the right time, pulling the levers at the right time. Beta Jim had a bunch of really good comments there. You know, his train of thought for I love a good rant, the ant rant, and
Let's
then
go
pro
through
rant.
it.
Like, yeah, just kidding. I love a good rant, and then the ant rant, and then finally he gets the pro rant, like my Twitter handle, just the R in front of it. Like, he nailed it. That was absolutely. I love seeing the train of thought as you could see he just found like more jokes and was like, yeah, wait a minute. Yeah, you should change the headline to let Beta Jim cook. That's very good. I like what McDermott's done. Like you said, I think he's pulling the right levers and pushing the right buttons at the right time. The simulated pressures we've seen, the creeper pressures we've seen, tying that in with 5 and 6 man pressures, then tying that in with the overall chess piece and mind game aspect of showing pressure and dropping out. I like what he's done. You know, this defense is flowing fast. They're playing fast. They're playing aggressively, mentally and physically. They have a huge test in front of them this weekend, right? Seeing how good this Miami group has been. And seeing what they've done from a production standpoint thus far. Again, Miami's going to be a big challenge for them, but I think I have faith in McDermott, and I'm excited to see the challenge of McDaniel and this Dolphins offense with their speed and the schematics and what they do. But McDermott is clicking and cooking himself, just leaning into the skill sets of his players, even with what we've seen from Terrell Bernard. Like, and this isn't me we're going to talk about it, but not taking anything away from Terrell Bernard. He's using him in a different way than Tremaine Edmunds because his skill set is different than Tremaine Edmunds, which is something we talked about like all offseason. So what you're seeing from Bernard is because his skill set is completely different. And this may sound stupid, but McDermott is leaning into that skill set piece because he doesn't have the size and frame and like what Edmunds could do downfield, but he's a tremendous blitzer. He's aggressive. He's smart. So he's putting him in those positions to succeed. And then you combine that with an individual execution we're seeing. This defense has been strong. Sean McDermott is leading it. And again, I think it stems from his defensive philosophy, his ability to get everybody on the same page and get everybody to understand the whys and the hows behind everything. And I think that's part of the reason we've seen an uptick in performance as well. I think there's a better understanding and a freer mental space for the defensive players. And you're seeing it, produce from a week-to-week basis.
Yes, absolutely. I've been really pleased with what Sean McDermott schemed up, and it hasn't been astronomically different, but I think, and you and Eric talked about this, and I know you've talked about it, but the use of creeper and simulated pressures and the fact that it's far more threatening now because both of your linebackers are able to kind of blitz gaps and be aggressive in that front. Mm-hmm. That's something that I think works wonders for the ability to not only execute blitzes, but sell them as well. And I think that's what helps when you're going up against these high-powered offenses, because the thing is, it's a beautiful thing when you can get and hit home without having to actually send more than 4 men or 5 men. And I think the Bills are in a position to be able to do that this year. But it's fun because, again, their defensive line structure, the fact that, and I'm knocking on wood real fast, Dan, but the fact that it's healthy right now, the fact that you're seeing Ed Oliver play at this insanely high-tech level and Daquan Jones right next to him is complementing that. And Leonard Floyd still looks like Leonard Floyd. And Gregory Rousseau with the length he has and his ability to set the edges, but also get this pressure and push people back. You're not only able to sell these blitzes, but you're also just able to hit home with 4-man pressure if you wanted to just run it with your defensive line. And I think that versatility of how the Bills can attack you with pressure or disguise their pressure. And this is in addition to solid to elite coverage in the back end. This is something that I think is just going to make life tougher for offenses. Now, against Miami, it's absolutely a test because Miami stretches you every way they can because they have absurd speed. But we talked about it in spaces, and I could absolutely see a world where Sean McDermott's defense is just clogging up the lanes, trying to make things visually difficult for Tua to process, making the first read go away. And I'm not saying Tua is a one-read guy, but I think with the quick pace of this offense, to not allow him to have the luxury to hit or misdirect people and hit that first read and have to hold it for just an extra half second is enough of a consequence for this defense to hit home. It's just something where I feel like there can be success. And tying it back to Sean McDermott, I've just been very impressed with what I've seen from him so far. And it seems like the transition to him hasn't been rough. They've been where they need to be. I haven't seen terrible amounts of penalties. I'm really loving the maturity of Terrell Bernard before our eyes. And that could be attributed to McDermott's coaching. But seeing Bernard recognize things pre-snap and call them out and be in the spot and be around the ball and know when he has to get off someone's route to get into a different spot on the field, like that Washington interception. This is all a result of McDermott's coaching. It is. And I think it's very refreshing to see. And I'm excited to see how it plays out throughout the course of the year.
Absolutely. And I think you hit a really good piece. I think that type of the defense that we've seen and the buttons that he's pressed and the levers that he's pulled, you need to see that against Miami. Like, again, we're not fully talking about Miami here, but you need to do anything and everything that you can to change the pre to post snap picture on Tua, whether that means, showing too high pre-snap and spinning down to single high or vice versa, or showing man and it's going to be zone, all these pieces, like all these different alignments on the back end. But I also think from a front perspective, like you do not want him keying in on anyone. You want him to be unsure of who's rushing, how many people are rushing, who's dropping, what coverage are they playing, all these pieces. And I think that simulated pressure game and that creeper pressure game is a huge piece in doing that. Because one, it can just dictate protection and can force offenses to keep guys in, and you can create free runners from alignments and attack teams protection plans and schemes up front by getting them into certain pieces with your alignments. Just for example, like showing, having the center covered and showing guys up front like that, you can dictate man on man, one-on-one blocking for an offensive line. And then if you know that, you can drop certain guys and bring guys from other spots, and you create free runners because they're not sliding to one side because they had to do 5-0, one-on-one protection type thing. So there's all these benefits to the way Sean McDermott is running this defense. It's what I wanted this defense to be. It's why I liked what Leslie Frazier did a lot. It's why I wanted Frazier gone. I think they needed more of this curated game plan, variety and multiplicity on the defense. And that's what we've seen from McDermott. And again, similar to the offense, what we've seen is he's not spamming these concepts. He's not just gunning 100 miles an hour with them. He's sprinkling them in here and there, which is what makes them that much more effective, because it's always in the back of your brain. Like, is this going to be a 5-man rush?
Yeah.
Is this a creeper? Is this a sim? Is it just going to be 4? Like, and you tie that in with the individual execution, like 234 qualifying edges and defensive tackles. The Bills have 6 players in the top 60 for pass rush productivity, and they have 4 in the top 25. Leonard Floyd is 9th. Oliver is 19th. Daquan is 20th. Jordan Phillips is 23rd. Groot is 36th. And AJ Epinesa is tied for 56th. Like, they're executing individually, but McDermott is unleashing the hounds up front, combined with his scheme and his attack-minded nature. And then exactly your point as well, the coverage on the back end has been sticky as hell, which is a little worrisome this week because of no Jordan Poyer, even though I'm seeing a ton of people on Twitter who are like, that's fine, he's slow and he sucks. Cool, whatever. But that's a whole other conversation. McDermott has his defense really clicking. It's nice to see.
Yeah, and I think the beauty of the linebacker group, too, going into the coverage is the fact that they're athletic enough to drop back if they need be. And I like that because it's just giving you the versatility to kind of show things pre-snap, where if they're trying to run either up the middle or outside, you could stack the box if you want to, and they'll be in position. But I actually have confidence in Milano and Bernard to at least be in the right spot to, again, like you said, visually just take it away from Tua. Like, we don't need Tua because it's irrational to think that you're going to be able to play man-to-man against Miami's speed. And it's irrational to think that you could hold a candle or keep these zones open because someone's going to find a leak or a soft spot in it. But if you could just really sit yourself in a spot where the lane is clogged, which Milano's been doing, which Bernard's been doing, I think that's enough to at least get you that hit home with the pressure. And it's just a testament to McDermott. And I said this in space yesterday. I'm going to say it again. I don't understand the disrespect. I don't understand the and I've just seen this nationally. I've seen it on Twitter, and maybe I'm ranting to the wrong group, but it's just annoying because this guy was Carolina's defensive coordinator. Their defense was in the Super Bowl. They had consistently good defenses, and they manned these defenses with linebackers similar to Bernard and Milano's size profiles. It wasn't like they had a Tremaine Edmonds in their system. These guys were like 6 foot, 6'1". I think there was one who actually exceeded it, but they were able to hit home with just athletic linebackers who played above their frame. And that's what you're seeing right now. And I pulled a comment up earlier. I should have started and I didn't. So I'm not going to scroll up, but it was like, it's the perfect example of show me what he can do versus what he can't do. And that's how he's treating Bernard. And that's how he's treating this defense.
I like that comment too. It's from Tim right here. Yep.
That's a great comment. Tim A says, Bernard is the perfect representative for when a coach says, don't tell me what he can't do. Tell me what he can do. That's exactly it. And they're playing to Bernard's strengths, which again is being that physical thumping linebacker who can rush gaps, but also just kind of read things pre-snap and be in the spot to hit someone. Like when we saw the Josh Jacobs run, with the gap wide open, it's just Bernard facing Josh Jacobs, and he lays his shoulder down and just trucks him. Like, that is beautiful. And I think that should bode confidence in Sean McDermott's defense and vote confidence in this group. And it's going to be tough against Miami. But really what I'm trying to say is I respect Sean McDermott's defense. I think he has a great track record. I don't think the style he plays is outdated because it's not like a Josh Boyer cover zero or a cover. I keep saying that. Like just like a complete sending of the hounds every single down and constant pressure, but really just tailoring and disguising and knowing when you can get away with something and when it's the time to actually send pressure, like 2nd and 8 against the Raiders when they're behind the 50 and it's the perfect time to blitz. Like these are the things that I feel like in a McDermott defense get used to. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch over the course of the year. And I think their defense has earned this title, even if they haven't faced the most advanced competition.
That's a very fair point. And I like the pieces on McDermott, like the type of, again, his defensive philosophy, him learning from Jim Johnson and that tree, like the whole concept is doing what you need to change the picture on the quarterback and make the quarterback uncomfortable. And that type of philosophy will never be outdated in football. It will never be out of style. It'll never be something that isn't in vogue, like attacking the quarterback, confusing offenses, confusing protection schemes, making players have to think real time. You know, we've talked about it with Miami all the time, right? Like what they do with their motion at the last minute, right before the snap, it makes defenses have to adjust real time. And it makes them have to go, we have to do this, or do we have to do that? And as you're doing that, the snap is happening, which is hard to adjust real time and on the fly. That's what a simulated pressure does, or these pressure looks from McDermott. That's what it does to the offensive line and the quarterback. It makes them have to adjust in the moment on the fly. And that's a hard thing to do when players are running around. And the average NFL play, I think, lasts like 2.7 seconds. Everybody's thinking like in a split second, and you have to get everybody from an offensive line standpoint. Everybody has to think the same thing at the same time. And if they don't, you get a free runner or you get a mistake in protection. And that's what McDermott is attacking. And again, that type of identity combined with being physical and aggressive, that type of mentality will never go out of style.
No. And again, it's just being intelligent with when you want to attack or knowing when the time and place is, which I think that's why McDermott's so good at what he does. And that's why I'll defend him, because it's not willy-nilly blitzing. It's not, I'm just going to send the hounds at you for the sake of doing so. It's, I know this situation can call for this. And if not, I know that I can manipulate you into thinking it because I can trick you. So I'm a fan. I had to just defend Sean McDermott's name on this show because I'm a big fan of it.
I have a question. Can I defend myself?
Oh, yes. I didn't know if you were going to address it. I didn't know.
I don't think Ant's being very objective in his defense of Dorsey. We're all entitled to our opinions. I didn't say anyone isn't entitled to their opinions, but I also don't think you're necessarily getting what I'm saying. So my defense of Dorsey was they had a very efficient.
Get those comments going, Jim.
My defense of Dorsey was they ran a very efficient offense last year, which they did. The Bills finished second in DVOA, which is a measure of efficiency for an offense. I also mentioned how critical I was of him starting in October because I said he was putting too much on Josh's plate and relying too much on Josh to be a unicorn. And this is where the Dorsey conversation loses me, because if you defend him, I think people just think that means you love him because you say something positive. Like I've been very on my individual show on Disguised Coverage, in the film room, on Twitter, I've been critical of Dorsey, and I've also praised him when he's done good. He's done very good this year with his adjustments and with his pieces. That also means that there are times last year when he didn't adjust, which I also said. I've said it multiple times, like he didn't adjust well down the stretch. The book was out on the offense. I don't really like to go back and forth, but I don't like when I'm very objective with my analysis, and everybody is entitled to their opinions. I just don't think that was an accurate portrayal of how I've spoken about Ken Dorsey. But
once again, everybody, let Ant cook. If you're not watching this live, there is a banner on the screen that says "Let Ant cook." I might make T-shirts after the show. We'll see. But yeah, listen. And
nobody crowned him. What did I crown Ken Dorsey with? By saying I liked what he's done with the run game and like what he's done all with the offense? That means I've crowned him?
It's just a situation where you have to look at everything when you would analyze a coach. Like if like for me personally, because I used to do this all the time, right? Like I was a point finger at coach and say this is the problem, and the byproduct of everything you're seeing on the field is one person. It's not. It's a million working mechanisms, and there's so much nuance in evaluation that nuance is honestly crippling when it comes to football discourse, because when you talk about one person, you start talking about a second and a third. It just kind of compounds to a point where you realize, oh, there's a million things at work here. So I just need to high point the things that are in control of this person, which again, I've heard Ant say it. I've heard everyone on Cover One say it. We are objective evaluators of every person on this team just because we high point some of the things. Like I just went on a rant about Sean McDermott. If Sean McDermott's defense gives up 45 points on Sunday, yeah, I'm going to criticize him. Like you're allowed to compliment, you're allowed to criticize. It doesn't mean your overall opinion leans one way or the other. It means that these things have happened. You have tangible evidence to point to give you this kind of discussion. So I implore people to just.
That's a good piece though too, and like because I like the comment from Beta Jim who said like second in DVOA last year, despite having an absurd wide receiver drop rate, no slot wide receiver, O-line to block. That's also a piece too, like. And we talked about it earlier, like the offensive line was poor. And you're looking at the weapons, no disrespect to Cole Beasley. Cole Beasley came off the street after not playing football the entire year and became like the starting slot receiver for the playoff run. He was having plays like designed where he was the target guy in the playoffs. So look at all the pieces together, the roster, the talent, the execution. There's all these pieces. That's why like my biggest thing always is, even though I put a lot of the week one loss on Josh Allen, very rarely is any one loss the fault of one player or one position group or one side of the ball. Everything in football, because there's so much variability, because there's so many people, you have 11 players on each side of the ball. You have the coordinators, you have the coaches, you have the scouts, you have the people who develop the game plans, even from an offensive perspective or defensive perspective. Like, you got like your defensive backs coach, he might be the one that puts the third down defense game plan together. Your linebackers coach might put the red zone defense game plan together, but everyone would just be like, well, they failed there this week. The defensive coordinator sucks. There's so much variability and so much interconnectivity with everything. It's so hard to just blame one person or give credit or success to just one person or one group or one side of the ball. There's a multitude of pieces that are connected. And it's the reason you can never really solely focus in on one piece. And I appreciate Sarah. I was actually typing into the comments and I started speaking. I said, no worries, Sarah, and put it in. I just hit enter on it now. But I'm in the same boat. Like, am I sitting here thinking like, well, Dorsey's going to run this high powered offense and he's always just going to be like indefensible? No, I don't think that. Like, I'm still sitting here thinking I really like what the Bills have done this year and what he's done. I want to see what happens come week 11, 12, 13, and do people start to catch on now? Does the run game start to become ineffective because the book is out? Like all of these pieces. So I second the notion there from Sarah. Like I really like what Dorsey has done right now. I still want to see how it turns out for the entirety of a year, because again, last year, Bills offense started out on fire. Things changed as the year went on, which is why I'm so excited to see their approach this year, because I think it's been more of a purposeful foundation building approach. So that way they can't be found out as early on or as significantly as the season goes through.
And there's evidence that they're doing this. Again, week by week, it seems like incremental changes. Like even against Washington, those kind of deeper routes to Diggs and Davis, we weren't seeing it as much in the first few weeks. And I don't know if that had more to do with Josh not looking that way and trying to play it safe, or maybe him being more like, I guess, more inclined to throw it. Maybe that was the first read, but it feels like there's an evolution or a metamorphosis each week incrementally with this offense. And that's all just stemming from, again, building blocks and everyone knowing their assignments and branching off of that. And I like this comment because I'm not going to rant about it, but Brian Daboll was a great offensive coordinator. We can all agree, but can we please just let's move on. Let's move on from Brian Daboll. Okay, he's not here anymore. He's gone. And honestly, man, I remember plenty of Twitter rants from many Bills fans in 2019.
Remember when they lost to the Jags? Remember when they lost to the Jags?
9-6.
Everybody wanted to burn Daboll at the stake.
Urban Meyer beating the Buffalo Bills in 2021 was when Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator, and that offense put up 6 points. And by the way, Diggs, Davis, I think Singletary, Knox were all playing in that game. So offensive coordinators have bad games. Brian Daboll had some great games down the stretch and a great playoff run. But guess what? He had stinkers too. And it's okay, because I think Brian Daboll's a great OC, but he's gone. He's never coming back. Well, I don't know about never, but
even the last game, even the 13 seconds game against the Chiefs that everybody remembers for the high-powered offense for the Bills, go back and look at how many 3-and-outs the Bills had, or how inefficient their offense was until Allen hit that 75-yarder to Gabe Davis. Look at the scoreline and how it was 3-and-out and how ineffective the Bills' offense was. Because again, and that's not an indictment to be like, yeah, because Daboll actually sucks. Because that's not what I'm saying. No one is perfect. There's just recency bias and variables and all these things that go into things. There's a lot of interconnectivity, and everything impacts everything else.
Hey, Anthony, do you remember that Pittsburgh Steelers game in Buffalo, the 4th-and-1 play call,
Oh,
where they
boy.
tried pitching it back? Do you remember? Because that was Ken Dorsey, right? Was
Everything.
that Ken Dorsey who called
Remember
that
when
play?
Scott Norwood missed that kick? That was Ken Dorsey's fault.
Oh, it's totally Ken Dorsey. Remember when I died in Zelda? That was Ken Dorsey's fault. But listen, there's one Chris Kepner. We're going to hit the home stretch of our defensive rant. We're not done yet, but I do just want to pull this one up. Chris Kep, we're Anthony Prohaska. I love that. Guys, the Cover One playbacks have been going on. We did one last night. There's one going on tonight where they're going to be watching. It's the Ohio State game. Chris, correct me in the comments. I apologize, but they are doing another one tonight, and it's going to be
doing one tonight. It's more just like kind of hitting everything. There's Ohio State. There's Duke and Notre Dame tonight at 7:30, but we're going live at 8, and we'll be hitting a whole bunch of different pieces around the scoreboard and all those things.
Yes, and they're a great time, and they're so casual, and everyone gets their comments noticed, and you can join the stage. It's a great time. I implore you all, please check out the Cover One playback going on tonight. And let's hit the final stretch of our defensive conversation here, because we have a few more things to talk about. And one thing that I want to pick your brain on specifically is the Buffalo Bills rushing defense. It's been a point of conversation. I know you've pulled up some concerning statistics about the Bills' stats after contact, which is definitely a problem, but let me hear your thoughts on it overall this season and kind of looking ahead to the rest of the year.
Yeah, my biggest concern with it has just been the tackling piece. They are allowing 4.7 yards after contact on the ground this year, which is the most in the league. Denver is second at 3.4 yards after contact per attempt, and that includes the Miami game where there were broken tackles left and right. And again, it's a bigger concern coming into this game against Miami because they're like second in the league in missed tackles and broken tackles, but first in percentage per snap. I think they lead the league in yards after contact overall, and just all the pieces that actually I have it right here. Yeah, Miami is first in yards after contact, total yards after contact, third in yards after contact per rush, second in broken tackles, second in missed tackles, first in broken tackles plus missed tackles forced per rush at 26%. All of these pieces, yeah, that's the biggest concern for me from a run defense standpoint. The yards after contact per attempt. And then that even goes back to week 15 last year against Miami. I know it's a different Bills team, a different Miami team, but Miami had 5.6 yards after contact per attempt in that week 15 game against the Bills, where they ran for 188 yards and they had a 0.36 EPA per rush, which was significantly better than the Detroit Lions mark on the year for leading the league at 0.09 EPA per rush. And we've seen it at times this year. But again, that's also going to happen, right? When you're a fast-flowing, aggressive type of defense, there's times you're going to miss tackles. Like there's times you're going to get caught out of position. So my biggest piece with the run defense has been the missed tackles and the broken tackles, however you want to exactly, Sarah. Exactly. That's not great. Like how with what happened to Denver against Miami. Part of it is it's just been if I'm remembering, it was really week 1 and week 3. I think week 1, the Bills gave up 4.9 yards after contact per attempt. But the big one was Washington, which you wouldn't think. Brian Robinson was breaking tackles and Gibson had a couple. The Bills gave up 7.1 yards after contact per attempt against Washington. So I think that's going to be paramount. And Mostert and A-Chain have good contact balance, and then they're also fast as hell, so they can put you out of position. And then when they put you out of position, they can run through you or run through a shoulder, run through an arm. So that's been my biggest thing from a run defense standpoint this year. And just rattling off the numbers, they've been inconsistent in their tackling. Again, I think some of it is due to the nature of how they play defense. Some of the bigger picture things have just been run fit stuff, right? Like guys getting caught in the same gap. And that was really stuff earlier in the year. I think as the Raiders game developed, as the Washington game developed, their gap integrity was better. Slant in the front and gap exchanging between the linebackers in the front, I think started to work a little bit better. I think we saw more gap and run fit issues in week 1 against the Jets. Like even that big Breece Hall run where he runs through Trey's arm a little bit and then busts off the 83-yarder. I think that was more due to not having proper alignment up front. And again, that's week 1. Things are going to happen. You got to work out the kinks, iron out the kinks, whether it was an adjustment error on Bernard or a pre-snap issue or a problem with McDermott, anything however you want to label it. It's week 1. I think those kinks start to get ironed out. I think they will be schematically better fitting the run from an integrity standpoint and a fit standpoint going forward, because they've already started to do it. But I am concerned about the tackling piece, because that's where you have to do it. You can fit the run tremendously, but if you're in the hole with the running back and you don't make the tackle, your run fits don't mean anything. You have to get there and fit it, but then you have to finish when you're there. And that's been an issue for them this year.
Yeah, you could sniff it out, but there's execution that has to come with it. I have more thoughts, but I'm going to let good old Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn interrupt me to tell you about the Cover One Premium Pass.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, become an insider today. The link is in the description below. That is the lifeblood of Cover One. It helps us do all of these things, like find all of these stats for you, as well as the premium Slack channel, which you can engage with discussion basically 24/7. It is one of the most important things that we offer, and I cannot stress enough that you should do it if you are a frequent follower of Cover One. It really is some of the best stuff you're going to find from really any football network that's out there. So please subscribe to it, link below, check it out. And going on your point again, when we talk about rushing defense, I agree with everything you've said. So it's a matter of, it feels like in years past, and in this year included, this team does bear down on the run, but it feels like they're just naturally going to give up an explosive play. It seems like every week. I mean, the Raiders game's the anomaly, but they have had their issues, again, post-contact, and you've seen these situations where running backs they do hit home, and then they just get that second step, and they're able to move forward. I mean, there were times where I think Robinson should have been brought down, or even that Gibson fumble. I mean, it's silly because it ended up being a fumble and it was a great play, but they didn't bring Gibson down on the first hit.
20 tackles.
Yeah, and that to me is a concern, completely valid concern when you talk about a Bills rushing defense going up against the number 2 rushing offense in the league, especially one as versatile as the Miami one with all the speed. But again, like you said, it's a progressive part of the year. People are going to get used to playing in Sean McDermott's not new style, but kind of having him coach them up and put them where they need to be. I think this defense relies a lot on the interior pressure hitting home at the line of scrimmage to be able to disrupt some of these runs and slow backs down. I think they do well at it, but I think it's also, yes, an execution issue that you hope to see improve throughout the year. I am concerned about it, but I also think it's one of those things where when you talk about just the core concept of like what these teams are trying to do, an explosive run sucks. An explosive run also comparatively to frequent gashes that are consistent and stable throughout the game, I think it sucks to give one up, but I also think you could still survive it. And one thing that we talked about yesterday in the space is when you're playing a team like Miami or other formidable offenses with good rushing attacks, if they rely a lot on a stretched field and you're condensing the field, I think it's one of those things where you might have the luxury of knowing that, okay, we want to shut it down, but if we don't shut it down, it's just a matter of keeping them out of the end zone, knowing that 1, they only kicked 3, and 2, we didn't give up that much time on the drive. So I'm kind of this mindset that I want to see it improve. I also think they've had a lot of flashes and looked very good at points. I mean, holding Josh Jacobs to -6 yards is something that just deserves praise in its own right. That's crazy. But yeah, explosive runs are really where my concern lies.
And it's also too, like, to your point, like it's kind of the nature of the beast. Like if your defense, like the Bills is based upon getting upfield and creating penetration and trying to make like explosive plays, there's going to be times where you're going to get caught out. If you're playing fast and aggressive, like, and you're trying to get upfield, there's times where it's not going to work out for you. And the offense has a run play that takes advantage of where you just came from. There's a hole there. If somebody misses a tackle, it gets worse. But again, like, there is some positivity to the Bills' run defense. Even just looking at it from an EPA standpoint, on the EPA per rush, they are, where are we here? They're 14th. So like kind of mid-tier in the league, despite all those missed tackles. But another piece that they are second in stuff percentage when it comes to run defense. And a stuff is a carry, which resulted in 0 or fewer yards. So it's the aggressives on both sides, right? Like their run defense is based upon creating havoc and trying to turn a 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 12 or a 2nd and 10 or a 2nd and 11. And when you play that way, there's going to be times where, we got caught out and now it's 2nd and 2, or they just got a first down on that run because we attacked so hard or we shot this gap. And because again, when you shoot gaps, sometimes it works beautifully and you make a play in the backfield. Sometimes you shoot a gap and it puts you out of position and everybody's going the other way and you go, we made a mistake. That's the kind of yin and yang of it. But that it works in tandem with what the Bills are doing, because if they can get you behind the sticks, they get you into more of those predictive and predictable situations. That's when they press those simulated pressure and creeper pressure buttons. That's when they can change the coverage picture and they play all these games. So it kind of goes hand in hand, which is why schematically, I think like from a run fit standpoint, they're going to get better and it'll be okay. My biggest concern is just that tackling piece, because their identity and their nature will stay the same, but they have to improve the tackling. Which I also think too, and I mentioned on Disguised Coverage this week, I don't think teams are good tackling wise a lot in the NFL anyway. Like a lot of it for me is, maybe this is too galaxy brain, but with how like the league agreement with the Players Association are, like you don't get a lot of physicality in training camp. Like two-a-days aren't a thing anymore. Like full padded practices aren't a thing anymore. Like everybody's just out there in like shells and shoulder pads or shoulder pads and shorts. Like it's just kind of like, not more lax, but there's not as much physicality and emphasis because everybody's trying to take care of their bodies more. And that combined with the change in rules that make it so you really can't hit anybody in certain areas when like they're live, I think that all contributes to poorer tackling in general in the NFL. And then you combine it with the way the Bills play defense, and I think you kind of get what you get from a missed tackle perspective. But that's just kind of like my big, underlying theory.
I agree with that. And I think also it's just naturally difficult. This isn't an excuse. These are professional NFL defensive players, but you got to think about the size and speed of the modern NFL running back now too. I mean, it's always been difficult, but some of these guys are running like 4.3s and they're like 200 plus pounds and they sit at a short height. So their contact balance is just insane. Like, it's just a difficult task when you're asking like a cornerback to kind of size someone up when they're sitting back. Like, here's the thing. If Tre'Davious White, even with the perfect angle on Breece Hall on that run, is sitting in a spot, it's still like, I don't trust Trey to make that tackle. And I just think that's a matchup thing. And when we talked about Miami last year against the Bills in Buffalo, one of the things they were doing, and I remember, I think it was you or Eric talking about this, but they singled out Taron Johnson because Taron Johnson's a great nickel corner and he can hit. But when you line him up against a running back at full speed, it's a terrible matchup one-on-one. So it's like, problematic. And I think that's just something that can happen with Bills rushing defense. And obviously you want it to get cleaned up, but again, it's also your outlook on the team as a whole and in context. Like, okay, yes, our rushing defense might not be as up to snuff, but then again, if our offense is performing well and it's taking time off the clock and we're scoring at will, then they're kind of have to get out of their rushing attack mentality and we don't have to worry about it as much, or it becomes a bit more predictable as a whole, which I'm hoping happens tomorrow, but I don't know, man. That's wishful thinking. That game, I'm trying to pretend that game doesn't exist until 1:00 hits, because I told my roommates it's going to be a 4-hour panic attack pretty much.
I'm super excited just from a pure football perspective, but then also, like as a fan, I just don't want to have to deal with everything all week and listen to everybody crown Miami if they beat the Bills. Like, I don't want to listen to the should Bills panic topics. I don't want to hear, and I don't watch or listen to like mainstream conversations, but they come into my Twitter mentions in a variety of ways, and I just don't want to deal with that. So selfishly, and then as a Bills fan, I just want the Bills to win, but I really don't want to hear a week of like, Miami is the greatest. Are the Bills in trouble? I don't want to hear everybody talk about why McDermott sucks and he should be fired. Like, I just don't, all the fallout. I don't want to deal with the fallout. I also hate watching tape when the Bills lose because I have to watch more of it to figure out where the problems are. And that's enjoyable.
I just like to stop to all people, national media, just stop. Unless it's reputable, respectable people that watch very closely, are like assessing the tape and have really good insight or data.
They can't, like, and I'm not trying to be like disrespectful. Like, the people on these like talking head shows, like the Stephen A. Smiths and the Skip Bayless and Colin Cowards and all that, like, well, I mean, I don't think they necessarily know ball in general. And I know they're also trying to say things for clicks and views, but not to, like, they have to cover everything across sports. It is impossible to cast that wide of a net and know things in detail. Nobody's going to know the details on a sports talk show of the intricacies of the Bills offense when they also have to talk about all the other teams in the NFL and the NBA and baseball and soccer or tennis or whatever. Like, it's too hard to cover that many topics Sorry, Sarah. It's tough to cover that many topics and be an authority on all of them, which is why niche down content is a better way to go when you want to know the intricacies and the details. So I don't consume like national wide stuff. And again, a lot of it is because that they have to cast such a wide net based on the demographic. They're just not going to know. Like, it's impossible.
And they also know what stirs people up. Like, let's be real, Bills fans. And I admire, again, this is never a negative thing for me. I admire the passion of this fan base. I feel it's unlike any other fan base in the NFL. But they know the second they drop anything negative about Bills, there's a producer saying we're going to get so much,
do you know
much
how
engagement.
Much, I posted like nice, like stuff that I like from the Dolphins schematically in a couple of comments. I had so many Bills fans. Yeah. Like I mentioned you earlier, like coming in and being like, oh, so you think the Bills are going to lose? Oh, so why don't you just crown Miami? And I'm like, I didn't say any of that. Why
you love them so much? Why don't you just marry them?
Right, exactly. But dude, like just you can respect and appreciate Miami without like disrespecting the Bills, but that's where that fandom comes in. And 1,000%, like the big box media people, they know, hey, let's put out this graphic that kind of undersells Josh Allen because it's going to get quote tweeted and commented to hell by Bills fans because they're going to rip it apart. But guess what? That's engagement for us, and any press is good press type of thing. So yeah, they definitely play into that. Same thing with like the New York markets and, talking about doom and gloom when it comes to like the Boston markets, because they know the Boston fans are always teetering on the edge of sanity. Like I'm right there. Like anytime I see anything with the Red Sox, like let go of Chaim Bloom out of nowhere. So like anything that's like the sky is falling, doom and gloom with the Sox, I'm like, I need to consume it. Like what's going on? What's happening? Like it's hard, man.
The famous Queens of the Stone Age lyric, close your eyes and see the skies are falling. And for many people, they are every week, even when the Bills win. However, I will say this, as I've grown older into my football watching, I have learned to just enjoy the game before I enjoy the team, which sounds insane, but it's a game. And you can appreciate good football. And when you can do that, it makes the game just a little more stress-free. Here's like, I still love the Bills. I still watch their games. I still get worked up, but I appreciate good ball. And if we get beat by a team that is just good, I appreciate the good of that team, but it's just easier watching. You'll have a less, stop listening to national media talking heads. Stop letting dudes with like Tua Tagovailoa profile pictures whose names are like Ryan 868523 tell you that Josh Allen sucks.
Yeah, and have like 17 followers, and all they do is like retweet a bunch of porn and stuff, and they're in your mentions talking about why Josh Allen sucks. Like, why are you commenting back to that person? Like, what are we doing?
You're like, it's just, there's so many people like Ant, like people at Cover One, people in the sect that are just pure ball knowers. Those are the people that will guide you into the right mindset. And the people that just talk crap or talking crap, that's what they do. So make your lives easier. Ignore all of that. Focus on the people who know ball and just enjoy the game and enjoy your team. But with that said, yes, I am going to have a panic attack when I watch Bills versus Dolphins.
With that being said, I'm gonna go throw up now.
But all right. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up today? Anything you want to plug? Anything you want to say to the good people?
No, I appreciate you having me. I host Disguise Coverage live every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Cover One channel. I'm also the co-host of the Cover One Film Room with Eric Turner live every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. And I appreciate you having me. I'm always down to join you anytime that I can. The only thing that always throws me off is like, because it's daytime, like the lighting throws me off here. I'm just very confused. In my space because I'm never recording at this time of day. But I had a good time here, and I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate the chat and all the back and forth and the activity on a Saturday morning, and I hope everybody enjoys their weekend. And for those of you going to the game, man, make it raucous, make it loud, make it hard for Miami. But be safe. Don't do anything too crazy. Don't let anybody get you, out of pocket and lead you towards anything sideways, but have a good time and be safe. And yeah, thank you for having me, Joe. I had a great time.
Absolutely. And yeah, if you're going to the game, find Linda. She's the good luck charm. Ask her for good luck and good blessings, and the Bills will win by 20. But
everybody support Linda. She's the reason the Bills will win.
This is Linda's day. Thank you so much again for your donation, Linda. To all of you in the chat today, to all of you that have tuned in live, to all of you listening after the fact, I appreciate each and every single one of you. It means the world that you come here on a Saturday afternoon, morning, whatever, to check out me rambling. But in all honesty, Ant, it's always a pleasure to have you here. Our conversations are always so much fun. It's never a dull moment when you come on the show, so I truly appreciate it. You can see our handles here, but follow him at pro__Ant. Follow me at show_DeRosa on Twitter. If you are somehow a Bills fan and somehow not a follower of either of us, what are you doing? Get with it. Come on.
Better.
Be better. No, but really appreciate all of you guys. Check out the description below for Underdog link and Cover One Premium Pass. We would appreciate it if you liked this video, liked all the videos on Cover One, and subscribe to the channel. But for Anthony Prohaska, my name is Joe DeRosa. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Under Review. Once again, go Bills and enjoy the rest of your weekend. See you soon.